It's positive. It's a kinder, gentler version. Yeah, it's like an invitation, sort of a strong-willed, come on, come on. Yeah, it's kind of a throwback to like the classic rock music I listened to when I was young. Like Steve Miller, Fleetwood Mac, Linda Ronstadt, all those bands that wrote like big, melodic rock songs.
During the making of her fourth album, Come On, Come On, Sheryl Crow turned 40. Such a birthday is a momentous occasion for anyone, but for a female working in the youth-fixated culture of rock and roll, it is inevitable that its impact will be even greater. By normal standards, Sheryl Crow left it pretty late in life to make her name in the music business. She spent her 20s working behind the scenes as a backing vocalist and songwriter, but she was already into her 30s by the time she released her first album under her own name and scored her first hit with a hugely successful All I Wanna Do. It was obvious, too, that she was hardly destined to be a novelty, flash-in-the-pan pop act, intending to score a few big hits that captured the zeitgeist, rake in the proceeds and then move on. Despite the catchy singles, Sheryl was patently an album artist, one whose music would naturally grow over the years, weaving into a tapestry of songs that, when viewed from a distance, would show her depth and development as a writer, performer, and as an individual. This is a career path that above all requires time and patience, and most with these aspirations start out at a much younger age. Particularly, it has to be said, if the artist in question is a woman. I went through a period when female songwriters, as opposed to dance acts like Madonna or Paula Abdul, were not getting signed, Sheryl later said when looking back on her early years of struggling to get a record deal and finding the confidence to get her career off the ground. She wasn't a sexy pop dance performer, a soul singer, or a wispy, introspective hippie chick. She wasn't even what could be called alternative, with none of the punk grunge stylings and attitude of Courtney Love or Alanis Morissette. In short, she conformed to none of the stereotypical categories that female musicians were supposed to fall into. She was certainly attractive, but at nearly 30, she must have been considered pretty much over the hill by a music business only interested in discovering and manipulating the next generation of teen queens to compete with Tiffany and Debbie Gibson. What Sheryl Crow was, and is a traditional rock and roller, with a little bit of country thrown in. If she'd been a man, there's no doubt that her songwriting talents and performing skills would have been recognised much earlier, and peers would have spoken admiringly of her rebellious outlook and rugged individualism. But in straight-out rock and roll, women were still meant to stay in the background, cooing sweet harmonies, as the man up front told of his vagabond wanderings and his restless heart. This, of course, was what Sheryl did, until the original country rock desperado, the Eagles' Don Henley, convinced her that she should be out there herself, singing and performing her own songs. Nevertheless, the mostly downbeat country stylings of that first LP suggest that she was still playing it safe by patterning herself after accepted female role models like Patsy Cline, Loretta Lynn, and Emmylou Harris. These were the sweethearts of the rodeo who suffered staunchly through domestic disharmony and who, if not always standing by their men, still sang movingly of a woman's woes and burdens. They may have been hard living, but they were nothing like the strutting tomboy that Sheryl would later adopt as her onstage persona, as she gained the confidence to increasingly project her real self. One of the few female precursors with whom Sheryl could claim common ground from the start was Chrissie Hynde of The Pretenders. By the time Sheryl had got around to making Come On, Come On, Hynde had become a close personal friend, and it was she who was on hand to help lift her out of the midlife crisis that threatened the completion of the album. A combination of fatigue, pressure, overwork, and the psychological albatross of the Big 4-0 approaching had culminated in a kind of mental breakdown, and her creative processes had ground to a halt. When Chrissie Hynde dropped by the studio one day, Sheryl confessed that it all seemed to be getting too much. She told her how hard the music business was, how difficult it was being a woman, and how sometimes she felt like throwing it all in. She didn't know what she was writing about anymore, she said, and she didn't know why she was doing it. It was taking her so long to make this record compared to her others, and she had no coherent idea of what she wanted it to sound like. Chrissie's reply was succinct and to the point, born of her years of experience as a strong, uncompromising female in this male-run business. she said, that you have to realise that music is just something you do. It isn't your whole life, and if you stopped making music, then your life would still be okay. It would still have meaning. Sheryl took these words to heart and was re-energised. Ironically, realising that she didn't have to make music gave her back the strength and sense of freedom she needed in order to finish the LP. Sheryl celebrated her 40th birthday with a huge party at Los Angeles' El Rey Theatre, where she performed and sang a duet with her friend, actress Gwyneth Paltrow. She had come to terms with being 40 and decided that it wasn't such a big deal as people made it out to be. She didn't feel any different. In fact, in many ways she felt younger, and as if to prove her point, she decided to take up surfing. She also made her youngest sounding record yet, one that harked back to her teenage rock and roll roots and appeared in her underwear on the cover of Lads magazine Stuff. Sheryl shrugged off any criticism of this move, saying it was just something she felt like doing, so why not? Once again, she was refusing to conform to anyone's expectations, while at the same time continuing to treat her life with a trademark levity that has allowed her to maintain her sanity throughout. This lightness of touch and sense of humour has stopped many people from taking Sheryl seriously, but all it really signals is her refusal to be a one-dimensional cartoon character. It's taken time, but Sheryl Crow has built her success her own way, by learning gradually to just be herself.
On occasion I wear a dress, not very often. It's too rock chick. My mom's like, what, were we bad parents?
Sheryl Suzanne Crow was born in Kennett, Missouri on February the 11th, 1962. She was one of 4 siblings with 2 older sisters, Kathy and Karen, and a brother named Steve. Her father, Wendell Crow, was a lawyer who also played jazz trumpet in a swinging big band style. Bernice, her mum, was a piano teacher, so Sheryl grew up in a very musical household. Her memories of this period are captured in part on the song We Do What We Can from her debut album Tuesday Night Music Club. Her parents enjoyed giving parties, and many of their friends were also musicians. When they came round, there would be jazz records playing or a spontaneous jam session. Her father also played locally in various groups, and Sheryl would frequently be taken as a child to watch him perform. Like any little girl, Sheryl idolised her father. While his work as a lawyer was undoubtedly important and kept the money coming in, it seemed distant, boring and impenetrable. However, when she saw him get up and play in front of an enthusiastic audience, the glamour and romance was unsurpassable. "That's my daddy," she would feel like crying as he stepped out of the darkness and into the spotlight to perform a solo. The evocative music, the exotic, slightly dangerous atmosphere of adult pleasures where everyone was dressed up and enjoying themselves, and above all, the attention lavished on both her and her father was intoxicating. Show business was in Sheryl's blood right from the beginning. Music was, too. Under her mother's influence, she began to have piano lessons from the age of 5. 8 years later, she wrote her first song. Sheryl's formative musical influences were wide-ranging and eclectic. While the music at home ranged from swing to modern jazz, her piano training was strictly classical. At the same time, being a Southern gal, she was listening to a lot of country and western as well as soul, blues and R&B derived rock. At high school, Sheryl was a cheerleader, and her passions were hanging out with the guys, drinking a few beers, smoking the odd joint, and above all, listening to music. As soon as she was able, she passed her driving test and got her first car. She would drive around town with the radio on, digging the sounds of the Steve Miller Band, Fleetwood Mac, Peter Frampton and the Eagles. It was typical soft rock fare of the time, but for Sheryl it represented freedom. Freedom from the small town she felt increasingly trapped by, with the same old faces, the same old circuits of the school playing fields, the late-night convenience store and the bars you needed to be over 21 to get into. Sheryl was committed in her search for the good times, and mostly she did okay. Occasionally she would get into trouble, but nothing too serious. And she was still diligent in her studies because her parents had impressed on her that that was the only way she would ever really be able to escape from her hometown's clutches. Rock and roll was the dream, but hard work was the reality. And so, in 1979, Sheryl Crow left Kennett for the University of Missouri in nearby Columbia. She would major in music.
I wrote it with my sister in Nashville, and I love it and will defend it, but I like the idea of writing a song about, not necessarily about betrayal, but about being involved in something you know is not right, but you just, it's like drugs or anything else. You love the experience of it, but you know that eventually it's going to have to end and it's not going to be good, it's going to be messy or whatever.
At the University of Missouri, which would later grant her an honorary doctorate in 2001, Sheryl Crow pursued her musical ambitions both in and out of the classroom. Aside from her studies, she played with a group called Kashmir and reputedly gave singing lessons to a fellow student, the future actor Brad Pitt. After graduating in 1983, Kashmir having gone the way of most college bands, she moved to nearby St. Louis, where she took a job at a local elementary school, teaching music to autistic children. To be a school teacher was not Sheryl's main ambition, but after university she knew she had to make some money and earn a living. At least she was using her musical ability and knowledge and in pursuit of something worthwhile, something that enriched the community and the lives of the children she saw on a daily basis for the next 2 years. It's amazing to see music work on little human beings who are otherwise unreachable. They feel the vitality of a guitar and they come alive, she later said of the experience. Her sense of empathy and responsibility towards these disadvantaged children and her awareness of music's power to heal later led her to become heavily involved in VH1's Save the Music campaign, which aimed to promote similar projects around the world. At the same time, Sheryl was still pursuing her ambitions as a songwriter and performer, singing and playing in a number of rhythm and blues bar bands around the neighbourhood. She had also got engaged, and for a while it looked as though her future might be mapped out and she would end up a happily married schoolteacher and occasional musician in a sleepy southern town, just like her mother. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the engagement didn't work out. The breakup affected Sheryl's life in a number of ways, causing her to reassess her dreams and ambitions and the direction her life was heading in. In 1986, at the age of 23, she decided to leave everything behind and move hundreds of miles across America to the Hollywood dream factory of Los Angeles. Running away and escaping from a situation is a reoccurring theme in Sheryl's songs. If she'd have stayed in St. Louis and settled down, married to a man that she knew deep down she wasn't in love with, she may have easily ended up like the character in her song Home. This was one of the first that Sheryl wrote single-handedly for herself, and it's one of her personal favourite songs. It portrays a loveless marriage and a wife grown resigned to reading romance novels and dreaming of yesterday. Many of Sheryl's early songs portray similar situations, which could partly be the influence of the country and western form on her writing. Yet there's also the sense that her whole life has been driven by a desperate fear of being tied down, trapped and compromised. So she's kept on moving on, like the archetypal roving troubadour of rock and roll legend. Except that, traditionally, such characters have always been men, leaving a trail of broken hearts and unmade beds behind them. For a woman, even a woman in rock, to adopt such a role is unusual. Females are seen by some as homemakers, the ones who want to settle down and raise a family, even in the rootless world of music. Many would judge a woman who is unmarried and childless at 40 a failure, even one as outwardly successful as Sheryl Crow. Deep down inside she must be sad and lonely, they say. Yet Sheryl seems to have accepted that the absence of a stable relationship in her life is just the price you gotta pay. Any pain or regret she feels is hidden beneath her trademark mixture of humour, worldliness and living for the moment. Her songs sometimes address the downside of this attitude, however. Keep on running and never commit, or stay and feel trapped. This is the dilemma at the heart of nearly all of Sheryl's songs.
of it is cathartic. I think all artistic expressions are cathartic in one way or another. Even if it's calculated, you're still utilizing an energy that you're experiencing. You know, a song like Lucky Kid is a song that really does, for me, capture the anger I had towards this person.
In Los Angeles, Sheryl worked as a waitress while steadily knocking on doors within the music industry. Her breakthrough came when she landed a job singing on a string of TV commercials. After reportedly earning more money in 15 minutes than she'd earned in 2 years of teaching, she packed in the waitressing and began pursuing work as a session singer with a vengeance. Over the next few years, she would sing on stage or in the recording studio with Sting, Stevie Wonder, Rod Stewart and George Harrison, among others. Usually uncredited, the gigs were not as glamorous as they sounded, or as well paid as Sheryl expected after the windfall of her TV slot. But they were a foot in the door, and they kept her going and in touch with the movers and shakers in the industry. It was thanks to these contacts that Sheryl managed to get herself along to the auditions for backing singers for Michael Jackson's upcoming world tour in support of his latest mega-hit album, Bad. At that time, Michael Jackson was the biggest star in the world. Bad was the follow-up to the record-breaking success of Thriller, and the accompanying tour would be a lavish, multi-million-dollar extravaganza, slowly circling the globe over the course of 18 months, playing to huge sold-out stadiums every night in a riot of pyrotechnics and musical technology. It involved a massive crew of technicians and performers, but even so, work on the tour was a much sought-after engagement, and it was a definite personal triumph for Sheryl when she learnt that she'd passed the audition. The high, however, was short-lived. Touring with Jackson was hard work, and the shows themselves often felt mechanical and impersonal. While undoubtedly impressive, from a musician's point of view, there was something soulless and formulaic about having to reproduce the same riffs every night. Everything was strictly timed and choreographed, and on such a vast scale that you seemed to be many miles away from the audience, or even the other musicians. The tour was an invaluable experience, and Sheryl certainly learnt a lot from it, both as a performer and as an operative within the music industry. But she felt just like another anonymous cog within the huge money-making machine that rolled on and off the stage night after night. She was required to perform in a blonde wig and high heels, and over the course of 2 years travelling together, met Jackson, her employer, infrequently. When it was all over, he still didn't know her name. The tour ended in 1989, and Sheryl found herself back in Los Angeles, unemployed. The come down from being on the road for so long was harsh, and she succumbed to a deep depression. Everything had moved on. She'd lost touch with her friends as well as her contacts on the LA scene. Above all, she was disillusioned with the music business. She'd toured right at the top of the game and had found it a lifeless, dispiriting experience. Was that what she'd been striving for all these years? Was that as good as it got? Sheryl didn't know. She just wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. As usual, she poured her pain and confusion into her songwriting. It was therapeutic, rewarding, and occasionally profitable too. Work started to trickle back in as both a backing singer and as a songwriter. Crow's tunes were covered by the likes of Celine Dion, Winona Judd, and Eric Clapton, and her singing work landed her in the studio with former Eagles vocalist Don Henley, who'd launched his solo career with the 1982 hit The Boys of Summer. The two quickly became good friends, and when Sheryl played him some of her own songs, he was impressed. She had a proven track record as a writer and a singer. She could play, she was good looking. Why wasn't she out there having hits with her songs herself, instead of selling them to other artists? A still depressed Crow muttered something about how she didn't have the confidence, she was too old, she wouldn't get signed, and she wasn't even sure if that's what she wanted to do with her life anymore. But Henley wasn't having any of her excuses. It was her destiny. All she had to do was step off the edge.
Everybody goes through phases in their life when they're kind of reevaluating, and I was a little bit tired of the whole thing. Depression is something that I do live with it, and I recognize it, and I know what it is. And I had a harder time really with it this time because I just felt like I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep doing what I was doing. And I think for the most part it was just I needed a break from it.
Following Don Henley's encouragement, Sheryl recorded a demo of her own songs, which she sent to top producer Hugh Padgham. He in turn sent it on to A&M Records, who to Sheryl's surprise offered her a deal. She immediately went into the studio to record her debut LP with Padgham producing. A&M, however, rejected the finished album. She was devastated, though in retrospect she saw the wisdom in A&M's decision. The recording sessions had been rushed, with Padgham putting pressure on her to get the songs finished quickly while making them as commercial as possible. Sheryl had no time to think about what she was trying to do, to consider the direction she wanted her songs to go in and how she wanted them to come over. Looking back, their rejection was the biggest favour that A&M ever did for her, but at the time it seemed like all of Sheryl's fears about the music business had been justified. After so long not even trying to compete because she was so sure that she'd be turned down, she had allowed Padgham and Don Henley to convince her that she was good enough. Then there was the euphoria of getting signed so quickly when her career seemed to be finally taking off. All that optimism evaporated, however, when the record company turned around and said her album just didn't come up to scratch. This just confirmed the insecurities and self-doubt she'd been harbouring all along. The truth was that even at 28, Sheryl just wasn't ready. The songs were half-formed, directionless, the production all wrong. She was trying to sing like somebody else's idea of a singer, rather than expressing her own personality and emotions in the way she phrased the lyrics. The set didn't do Sheryl or her songs justice, and it was back to the drawing board. Still reluctant to consign the hours of studio time and money that had been spent to the wastebasket of experience, Sheryl let her then-boyfriend, Kevin Gilbert, take the master tapes away and attempt to remix them into a more palatable form. He struggled with the raw material, eventually conceding defeat, and handed the demos over to his friend, producer Bill Bottrell, who had his own studios in Pasadena. Bottrell didn't think he could do anything with the demos, which now seemed stale and overly worked on, but he saw the potential in Sheryl's songs and her voice, and asked to meet her. Gilbert brought her over, and through A&M the trio were introduced to another musician, singer and songwriter David Beowald. The four of them began working together in Bottrell's studios and often ventured out as well to the Tuesday night jam sessions at a local bar. The aim was to keep the music loose, warm and spontaneous. In contrast to the contrived feel and overproduction of the Padgham demos. Slowly, the Tuesday Night Music Club was being born. Beowald in particular was a vital ingredient in the mix, a perfect sharp foil to Sheryl's innate optimism and homespun philosophy. He first came to prominence as one half of the Los Angeles-based duo David and David, backed by multi-instrumentalist David Ricketts. Their 1986 album for A&M, Boomtown, was a top 40 hit and a critically acclaimed triumph full of angry, cynical songs that portrayed Los Angeles as a city of shattered dreams. Beowald's solo debut, Bedtime Stories, was an even more focused statement of urban alienation and loneliness. The album saw Beowald rated by Bruce Springsteen, among others, as a songwriter capable of painting a complex story with a few simple words. Indeed, his influences were more literary than musical, drawing on short story writer Raymond Carver, playwright Tennessee Williams, and detective novelist Raymond Chandler, to name but three. His barbed, ambivalent style lent depth and darkness to Sheryl's songs, beginning what would be a memorable partnership.
It's like handing over a newborn baby to be scrutinized by the world, obviously. And the first door it has to get past is the record label. And they really liked it, so I felt pretty good about letting it go.
A&M happily released Tuesday Night Music Club in 1994. The self-mythologizing sleeve notes claimed that for the past year or so, Sheryl had spent most Tuesday nights at Bill Bottrell's vibely lit, tapestry-draped living room of a studio, with various musicians simply picking up the nearest instrument or open mic in order to create and record the songs on the album. While the reality may not have been quite so uncontrived, the image suited the record's laid-back, rootsy sound perfectly. Loosely, the musical lineup came down to Bill Bottrell and David Beowald on guitars, Dan Schwartz on bass, and Brian McLeod on drums, with Beowald's old partner from David and David, David Ricketts, playing bass on Leaving Las Vegas. Kevin Gilbert is credited with drums on Run Baby Run, emotional support and being able to play anything, while Sheryl's father Wendell plays trumpet on We Do What We Can, as well as inspiring the lyrics. Sheryl credits herself with vocals, unused classically trained piano, unused untrained guitar, and unorthodox Hammond. Run Baby Run opens the album with its striking opening line, "She was born in November 1963, the day Aldous Huxley died." The character in question, then, is a girl roughly Sheryl's age, whose parents were typical 60s idealists. However, all their daughter learnt from them was to keep on running. A slow guitar and piano-led groove, with echoes of Abbey Road-era Beatles, builds to a soaring chorus with a gospel feel and rich, warm Hammond organ tones. The song sets a generational tone for the album, linking up with all those who were born in the 60s and looking back on that era with a sense of childlike innocence lost. Yet the song also addresses the failings of that time and the way that the children of the 60s feel let down and disillusioned by what happened afterwards. Her mama believed that everyone could be free, so her mama got high, the song dryly observes, and goes on to paint a picture of a character who can't commit and who avoids responsibility at all costs. It's the persona Sheryl most often adopts in her songs, tacitly acknowledging the desperation and the hollowness at the heart of the life of the good time party girl. Leaving Las Vegas sees Sheryl singing for the first time in the insouciant tone of voice that millions of listeners would soon become familiar with. Smart and just a little bit cynical, with a dry sense of humour, an arched eyebrow, and the suggestion of a devil-may-care, take-it-as-it-comes attitude to life. Like a female equivalent to the persona adopted by one of her heroes, 70s rocker Steve Miller, on numbers like The Joker. The song lopes along over a sparse, funky backing track. Sheryl's voice bedded down among acoustic guitars, wordless backing vocals, and unobtrusive keyboards. It was inspired by a novel of the same name written by David Beowald's friend John O'Brien, which was later filmed starring Nicolas Cage as its alcoholic anti-hero. Lines like, "I'm standing in the middle of the desert, waiting for my ship to come in," convey a sense of desperation amid Jack Kerouac-like images of sleaze, neon, and truck stops. Strong Enough is almost a country and western ballad, with Bill Bottrell's pedal steel humming mournfully between touches of Hammond, yet the unusual bass and minimal percussion have an almost African feel, creating a deceptively unique hybrid. "Lie to me, I promise I'll believe. Lie to me, but please don't leave," Sheryl sings. "Are you strong enough to be my man?" Can't Cry Anymore follows, a low-key rocker of the kind that someone like Tom Petty produces. Like Run Baby Run, and implicitly much of the rest of the album, it's a song about escape, about blanking out your feelings and the temptation to run away from your problems. Solidify, similarly, is about refusing to commit, a deep, funky jam that wouldn't sound out of place on a Prince album. Next is the Na-Na song, a stream of consciousness list over a hypnotic, psychedelic raga that gives it a mantra-like feel. In the grand tradition of R.E.M's It's the End of the World as We Know It and Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues, it throws up some truly weird images, as well as some telling remarks on the music business, sweetened by the na-na harmonies of the chorus. No One Said It Would Be Easy is a brooding ballad about growing up and living with someone for the first time, about struggling to keep that relationship going. Once again, it's essentially a country song, complete with a lyrical mix of sadness and hope in the face of adversity. The softly strummed guitar and the chorus, "No one said it would be easy, but no one said it would be this hard. But there's a chilling, cynical resignation in a line that stands alone near the end of the song. I sometimes wonder who he's picturing when he looks at me and smiles. This in turn gives a darker twist to the final line in the chorus. No one thought we'd come this far. Oh, and look, we've come this far. What I Can Do For You shifts from a half-sung, half-spoken verse to a Beatles-esque chorus, sung from the point of view of a sleazy, manipulative older guy in a position of power, making some girl an offer he thinks she can't refuse. You're never gonna make it all by yourself, you're gonna need a friend. If you just be nice, if you do what I say. The hit single, All I Wanna Do, follows, and is easily the album's most upbeat, accessible pop song. In context, however, the seemingly optimistic, carefree lyrics take on darker tones. Bill Bottrell's slide guitar gives the tune a country feel, while David Beowulf's hand is obvious in the detailed, evocative slice-of-life imagery in the lyrics, a pared-down short story in the brutal, minimalist style. The characters in the song are seedy barflies out of Tom Waits or Charles Bukowski, drinking beer at noon on Tuesday in a bar that faces a giant car wash. Hating each other, yet thrown together by circumstance, peeling the labels off bottles of Bud, lighting matches and watching them burn away. The good people of the world are washing their cars, well, they're nothing like Billy and me, drinking because it's all they can do, and kidding themselves that they're having fun. We Do What We Can has a lazy West Coast jazz feel reminiscent of Chet Baker, and lyrics and a melody that one could almost imagine Elvis Costello singing in his Almost Blue period. With its reference to jazz pianist and big band leader Stan Kenton, it recalls Sheryl's childhood, lying in bed, listening to the sound of music and her parents' friends downstairs. Again, there's this wistful acknowledgement of a lost era of innocence, of growing older, getting by, and the inevitable compromises this entails. These are the choices we make to survive. We do what we can. Piano, bass, pedal steel and percussion merge on I Shall Believe, as Sheryl sings of needing to believe in something, even if you know it's an illusion, of even false hopes being better than none at all. Even if it's a lie, say it will be all right and I will believe. The narrator is broken down on this hushed gospel soul ballad and resigned to a life of compromise, world weariness and just trying to survive. She too, however, is using her man as a crutch, only asking for his love when she feels down. Now she's asking him to give her one last chance, begging him not to give up on her, even though she must seem like a hopeless case. It's a typically dark, downbeat ending to an album that probably surprised a lot of people who bought it on the strength of All I Wanna Do. While the songs are character-led and co-written, it's tempting to link the mournful feel of the record with Sheryl's own depression just prior to making it. The years of struggle that preceded her creative breakthrough and the fact that her and Kevin Gilbert had only recently split up as a couple. Perhaps because of this, the album flopped on its initial release. However, thanks to relentless touring and promotion, Leaving Las Vegas became a minor hit when released as a single, and this reactivated some interest in Tuesday Night Music Club. It was the next single, though, that was to make Sheryl a household name as the girl who just wanted to have a little fun, which, for a 32-year-old singing about wasted lives and broken hearts, was not bad going.
You know, records are sort of like, they're little documents of what you were going through when you wrote them. They're like little calendars. And I have real mixed emotions about it. I still love some of the songs on the record, and it's fun to play some of them, and some of them it's more work to play. But, you know, I guess you just put them behind you and you move on and you just keep creating.
Sheryl worked really hard to make Tuesday Night Music Club a success. Taking her band out on the road, she opened for Bob Dylan, among others, and played as many high-profile festivals that summer as possible, including Woodstock '94. She appeared on late night TV and put out 4 singles, all with strong videos that gained heavy rotation play on MTV and VH1. Leaving Las Vegas, Strong Enough, Can't Cry Anymore, and especially All I Wanna Do pushed her into the public eye, and she also had several non-LP tracks out on compilations. Hundreds of Tears, an early song, was featured on the Point Break soundtrack as early as 1991, and in 1994 she contributed a version of Solitaire to a Carpenters tribute album, and Do You Make Her to a similar set dedicated to Led Zeppelin. Over the next couple of years, she performed a bewildering array of exclusive live versions of songs from the album for various TV and radio shows, and these were then released on promotional compilations. A completist Sheryl Crow fan could be kept busy for some time. Her efforts paid off, however, and in 1995 All I Wanna Do was named Record of the Year at the Grammys, while Sheryl also won Best Female Pop Vocal and Best New Artist. She was named Sheryl Rookie of the Year by Entertainment Weekly, and she appeared at the opening of the Hard Rock Cafe and Casino in Las Vegas, alongside the Eagles. By this time, Tuesday Night Music Club had sold over 6 million copies. The price, though, was high. In March 1994, Sheryl and her band performed live on US TV's The Late Show with David Letterman, playing the song Leaving Las Vegas. Afterwards, Letterman invited Sheryl over to his desk for a chat on air and asked her if the song was autobiographical. She replied that it was. This infuriated her band, particularly Gilbert and Beowulf, who thought she was denying their songwriting contribution. It was based on a novel. Beowulf had introduced Crow to both the book and its author, who had come down to the sessions. Sheryl may have put some of her own experience and empathy into the lyrics, but they were definitely a collaboration. There was a huge row after the show, with the musicians accusing her of dismissing their efforts and taking all their credit. The group that made Tuesday Night Music Club would never play together again. Shortly after the Letterman show, Beowulf's friend John O'Brien, the author of Leaving Las Vegas, shot himself fatally in the head. His family denied that Sheryl's comments had any bearing on his suicide, but Beowulf refused to speak to Sheryl or forgive her. To compound the tragedy, in May 1996, Kevin Gilbert was found dead of autoerotic asphyxiation. For her next album, Sheryl Crow would be on her own.
I think probably maybe Home, or I enjoy playing Maybe Angels a lot. That kind of changes night to night.
The Sleeve for Sheryl Crow, her aptly self-titled second album released in 1996, betrays its troubled conception. A moody Crow stares sullenly out through hollow, heavily mascaraed eyes, glowering in a large leather coat pulled defensively around her, unsmiling. The dark tones are entirely at odds with the warm colours and hippie chick image of her debut, yet paradoxically, this is a much more upbeat record. On the inner sleeve, Sheryl looks like a sleazy glam rock ultra vixen, leaving a desert trailer in snakeskin pants, white silk jacket and a sequined boob tube, makeup plastered across her almost unrecognisable face. This gives more of a clue as to where the album's coming from. Glam and grunge, with crunchy guitars, crisp beats, and an almost deliberately artificial synthetic sound. Lyrically, there's a preoccupation with fame and glamour, the frozen smile and the desperation that lies behind it. Blurred, smudged and uneven typefaces abound. This is Sheryl's bid to make a hip 90s rock album. She's succeeded, but with a knowing smile that says, yeah, I can do this, but I can comment on it from the inside too. Sheryl began work on the album with Bill Bottrell, who alongside drummer Brian McLeod was the only survivor from the ill-fated Tuesday Night Music Club lineup. It wasn't long though before musical differences surfaced between the pair. Sheryl was outgrowing her old mentor and wanted to take her songs in a different direction. Bottrell retains co-writing credits on Maybe Angels and Hard to Make a Stand, But Sheryl's main collaborator on the album was songwriter, producer and guitarist Jeff Trott. Trott co-wrote 7 of the 14 tracks on the LP and played throughout. As for production duties, Sheryl took them on herself, learning as she went along. She also wrote several songs single-handedly, marking the emergence of a more personal, confident Sheryl Crow, ready to step out of the shadows of other people's influence. The grungy sound of the opening track, Maybe Angels, is in immediate contrast to the folksy strum of the previous album. Yet beneath the surface, nothing has really changed, and maybe this song isn't so far removed from Run Baby Run, Tuesday Night Music Club's opener, as it first appears. There are the same images of travel and escape, while the references to Jesus, angels, UFOs, Elvis and Kurt Cobain play with conspiracy theories, superstition and mysticism. Dirty bass, guitar and Wurlitzer organ grind over a revolving drum loop. A change had the bracketed "would do you good" added when it was released as a single, completing the nagging, catchy chorus line that was stuck in everybody's heads throughout 1997. Powered along by loping hand claps and funky Hammond organ stabs, Sheryl delivers reams of jive-talking, stream-of-consciousness beat poetry. 10 years living in a paper bag, feedback baby, he's a freaked-out cat. There are images of conspicuous wealth, trashy glamour, Ouija boards and escape, all leading to the payoff line, "Hello, it's me, I'm not at home. If you'd like to reach me, leave me alone." Home is the first song to be written by Sheryl alone. It's a personal favourite of which she's justly proud. Openly showing her country and western influences, it's a slow, woozy lament for love grown stale and dreams betrayed. She doesn't feel butterflies in her stomach when she looks at him anymore, just nothingness. She can't remember what she saw in him when she was 17, but spends all her time looking back and dreaming of romance with strangers. Jeff Trott plays slide guitar as Sheryl coos gently into your ear, giving one of her softest, most sultry vocal performances. Sweet Rosalind features guest saxophonist Steve Berlin honking away on this mid-paced R&B flavoured stomper. We're on familiar lyrical ground in this tale of a woman who's always avoided commitment or being tied down, only to realise that sometimes you've got to give in, sometimes you've got to be loved. Another Jeff Trott collaboration is If It Makes You Happy. This was another hit single, with lyrics about finding Geronimo's rifle, Marilyn's shampoo, and Benny Goodman's corset and pen. Except, of course, as Sheryl says, she made that up. But if it makes you happy, it can't be that bad, can it? Sheryl also admits that she still gets stoned, and claims that she's not the kind of girl you'd take home, giving a pleasingly rebellious edge to this daytime radio favourite. It's a raunchy, strutting rocker, with her hoarse, full-throated holler on the chorus proving that she is indeed still partial to the odd smoke and shot of Jack Daniels. But there's the usual ambiguity to the lyrics too. If it makes you happy, then why the hell are you so sad? Redemption Day is another solo Crow composition, a folksy bluegrass strum featuring Pete Thomas of The Attractions on drums. Sheryl's voice is raw and husky as she sings what amounts to an early Dylan-style protest song, complete with gospel imagery of heaven, hell and judgment day. The crunching guitar riff and steady beat of Hard to Make a Stand mark it out as another single. Pete Thomas is once again on drums, and the lyrics again betraying the influence of early Dylan. We've got old James Dean Monroe, who insists on being known as Miss Creation, handing out flowers at the stop and go. Then there's the girl who gets shot down in the road while taking care of her own body, though that isn't what she meant. What did she mean? What does any of it mean? Who knows? Everybody gets high, everybody gets low, Sheryl sings on Every Day is a Winding Road, which just about sums it up. She's never been into intellectualism, but the brochure sure looks nice. Brian McLeod's shuffling drum loops drive the whole thing along. Neil Finn of Crowded House sings backing vocals, and voila, another drive time radio hit. Love is a Good Thing opens with the controversial lines, "Watch out sister, watch out brother, watch out children while they kill each other with a gun they bought at Walmart discount stores." This wasn't particularly a dig at Walmart, although they do sell guns, but it led to the major supermarket chain banning Sheryl's album from their shelves. She sings like a female Sly Stone over a funky wah-wah groove, while the lyric finds her stating the obvious in the face of a gun and hate-driven culture that still needs to be told. Oh Marie is about a party girl who's all magazines and Benzedrine and vodka, who stumbles home around 4 in the morning. She says she's lonely. How can that be? Every night she's got company. Every line is a sharp, evocative image, and Sheryl can obviously identify with this girl who fell in love once, but only got burnt. Need is love and love is need, Crow muses, but she hopes she's happy, while adding, what about me? Superstar sees wah-wah guitar and piano interacting in a glam funk strut about the trashy allure of cheap glamour, reinventing yourself as a superstar, and the emptiness that this hides. There are references to Bandini and Camilla from John Fante's classic 1939 LA beat novel Ask the Dust, but the song could equally be about Edie Sedgwick or some other narcissistic scenester from Andy Warhol's Factory Inn crowd. The book finds Sheryl lambasting some writer who turned their love affair over 3 days in Rome into some tawdry bestseller. Legendary LA session drummer Jim Keltner, best known for his work with Bob Dylan, guests, while the combination of guitars, strings, horns and keyboards gives the song a slurred, dreamy texture. Ordinary Morning is a slow, heavy, piano-driven, quiet storm of a song. Another solo Crow composition, it draws on the usual themes of escape, avoiding responsibility, one-night stands and slipping away, with a blistering guitar solo from Jeff Trott. The album ends with the acerbic, crunching rocker, Free Man. Sheryl gets involved with some right-wing libertarian nutter who camps out in the hills with a stash of guns and his weirdo mates. Well, he talked a lot about freedom, which sounded attractive, but then he started in with the racism and she tried to run away, but he came after her and forced her to marry him. I'd appreciate a little bit of government now, Sheryl admits, at the end of this cautionary tale of freedom, meaning anything but. Sheryl Crow, the album, was an even bigger hit than its predecessor, landing her on the cover of Rolling Stone by the November of 1996. In 1997, she was officially the number 5 singles artist of the year and won Best Album and Best Female Rock Vocal Performance for If It Makes You Happy at that year's Grammys. It was clear that Sheryl was now ready to move up to the next level.
This record's a little more up-tempo, so it's a lot more fun to play. I don't read the reviews, I haven't watched the charts, so I really don't know. From what I understand from my manager, is that everyone's pleased, so I guess it's doing okay.
Despite the album's success, Sheryl's trashy image on Sheryl Crow alienated a lot of the fans who had fallen in love with her earthy, hippie chick look. The change was most apparent on the video for If It Makes You Happy, where she invented herself as a grungy fashion queen. For the follow-up, Every Day is a Winding Road, she reverted to a more traditional image, and her crafted country songwriting roots were to emerge once again on her next LP, The Globe Sessions. Before that, though, Sheryl was asked to do the theme for the next James Bond movie. It was an unexpected honour, and she lived up to the responsibility with the song Tomorrow Never Dies, which was nominated for a Grammy and Golden Globe Award for Best Song from a Motion Picture. She embarked on the 1997 Lilith Fair Tour, an annual caravan of female rock, folk and country artists, as well as her own solo tour. In October, she opened for the Rolling Stones for 5 dates on their Bridges to Babylon tour. A Change Would Do You Good and Home were both released as hit singles, and Sheryl appeared on the soundtracks to the movies California and Boys on the Side. After all this activity, it was no wonder that Sheryl pulled out of the 1998 Lilith Fair tour, citing exhaustion and overwork. The Globe Sessions, begun in September of that year, partly reflected the strenuous experience of touring and the culture shock of coming home. It was a more personal LP than the last two, relying less on fictional characters and stories, and more to do with Sheryl's own feelings about her life over the last couple of years. I'd been on the road for so long, and I'd really enjoyed all that, but found when I got home I'd let a lot of things and relationships go, she said. There was definitely a lack of balance, and I'm trying to find balance right now. The songs came from a place of real self-examination and reassessment, reflecting the fact that Sheryl was getting older and her priorities were changing. For the first time, the album was self-produced from the start, and Sheryl went in with a definite idea of the kind of record she wanted to make. She wanted it to feel warm and layered, with strings and horns, while drawing strongly on her country influences. The Eastern sounds on Riverwide were originally inspired by a Walt Whitman poem and Billy Gentry's haunting Ode to Billy Joe, and the album revealed Sheryl's newfound skill on the harmonica. She had good tutors, Mick Jagger and Ronnie Wood from the Rolling Stones. Stones saxophonist Bobby Keys also played on the record, and the band's influence is apparent throughout. The Globe Sessions was nominated for 5 Grammys: Best Album, Best Rock Album, Best Producer, Best Female Rock Vocal Performance for There Goes the Neighbourhood, and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance on My Favourite Mistake. In the end, it won Best Album, and deservedly so. Sheryl Crow was now in a league of her own.
There are some pop idols on this record. And it wasn't really intentional to have all these people on the record, but it took me a while to make the record. I worked on it off and on for like a year and a half, and there were people kind of in and out of my life at that time. Just people that I have relationships with, like Emmy Lou I did a lot of work with. And just for me, that's my favorite. I absolutely love singing with her. And she was in Nashville when I was working, so had her come down. And Stevie Nicks, I just worked with her on her record, so she came down. And, there was just a lot of trading off.
In mid-1999, Sheryl started dating actor Owen Wilson, star of Armageddon, Shanghai Noon, and Haunted House. Shortly afterwards, she made her own movie debut alongside him in the low-budget indie film The Minus Man. In the movie, which also starred country singer Dwight Yoakam, she plays a junkie who's killed off early on, while Owen is the murderer. Sheryl's next album, Sheryl Crow and Friends Live from Central Park, was released in December 1999. Her band now comprised of Peter Stroud on lead guitar, Tim Smith on bass, Jim Bogus on drums, and Mike Rowe on keyboards. For this very special live show, they were joined by a stellar lineup of superstar guests. Strong Enough featured support from the Dixie Chicks, while Sarah McLachlan duetted with Sheryl on The Difficult Kind. Chrissie Hynde sang and played guitar on If It Makes You Happy, and 3 other major stars joined Sheryl for versions of classic songs from their own back catalogue. Eric Clapton on The White Room, Stevie Nicks on Gold Dust Woman, and Keith Richards on Happy. The finale was an all-star jam on Bob Dylan's Tombstone Blues, confirmation if any were needed that Sheryl Crow could now count herself among the greats. In 1999, Sheryl had another hit single with her version of the Guns N' Roses song Sweet Child O' Mine, taken from the soundtrack of the Adam Sandler film Big Daddy. She followed that up in 2001 with Kiss That Girl from the Bridget Jones Diary soundtrack, and at the end of 2001 performed the song Safe and Sound at America, a tribute to heroes. The song was taken from her next album, which had been an uncharacteristically long time in the making. Partly this was due to outside work pressures, such as her production of Stevie Nicks' 2001 album, Trouble in Shangri-La. Sheryl also went out on the road with Nicks to promote the record, and in her personal life made the move from Los Angeles to New York. But she was also suffering from depression, and her uncertainty over the direction she wanted the album to go in led to a creative block. For a long time, the working title of Come On, Come On was Songs from the Waiting Room. It took a few sympathetic words from Chrissie Hynde to set Sheryl going again, and in the end she found that what she really wanted to do was to go back to basics. Come On was inspired by the classic rock that Sheryl had grown up listening to throughout the 70s and early 80s. Rock songs that were well crafted, that you could sing along to, that were a soundtrack to your summer. The first track on the album, Steve McQueen, was a shameless tribute to the Steve Miller Band, as well as the rebellious actor of the title. It's So Easy was written with her sister, a country and western songwriter in Nashville, and they intended to give it to another artist until her record company insisted she sing it herself. The song, which dealt with an adulterous, clandestine relationship, was always conceived as a duet. So Sheryl recruited Don Henley, who had first encouraged her to embark on a solo career all those years ago, to sing with her on it. You're an Original featured Lenny Kravitz, while country legend Emmylou Harris sang on the September the 11th inspired The Weather Channel. Stevie Nicks featured on the crunching, driving title track, and Sheryl declared that she wanted the album to represent freedom, individuality, and the sense that anything is possible. Soak Up the Sun was released as a single in March 2002, and in a sense, Sheryl was back where she started, as a rock chick, strutting through the streets with one hand on her hip, going down to the beach for a beer. Except now she had earned her freedom, and instead of being a fan, daydreaming of success, she was up there with her icons as an equal. Sheryl says that she still hasn't written the song that she'd like to be remembered by. She's still convinced that the best is yet to come. She's living for the moment, but looking to the future, knowing that every change she makes will do her good.
Thank you for buying Maximum Sheryl Crow. We hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for further titles on Chrome Dreams coming up soon. If you did enjoy or have any comments or suggestions, write to us at Chrome Dreams, PO Box 230, New Malden, Surrey, UK, KT36YY, or email on mail@chromedreams.co.uk. Details of our full catalogue are listed on our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye for now.